All right, and hopefully everybody can hear me. My name is Michael Barker. I want to welcome everybody today. Thank you for attending. We've got a lot to cover, and I want to thank TAG for putting this on. I'm a member of the TAG Defense Industrial Base State Task Force for CMMC, and we've been meeting for a number of years, and we went back out and looked at the videos that we had posted online. Some of you may have gone out and looked at them and realized that we were still talking about CMMC 1.0. I should have probably put it in the title, CMMC 2.0, because at the end of last year, new guidelines came out. And so we realized that we were actually handing out maybe some old information. And then there were probably some people in the audience today that did not know about the new information that was out there or did not know what CMMC was about. So this is hopefully the first in a series where we're going to catch up with talking about CMMC 2.0. My name is Michael Barker. As I said, I am with the Georgia Tech Enterprise Innovation Institute. I mainly deal with manufacturers, but we have obviously a lot of different work or industry segments that we work with at the Enterprise Innovation Institute. So I will be coming at the presentation from a manufacturing standpoint, but really when we look at it, it would apply to any industry group that is doing work with the DoD. If you want to find out more about me, I don't want to waste time on that. I put my LinkedIn on the main slide, so you can go out and see that I actually started in this industry when I had hair, and it was a lot darker color than it is today. So let's get started. So, you know, I've been on the faculty, the academic side, and I always want to make sure that my students understand the so what. Why do we care about this? So my goal for you today, hopefully, is to learn something new, something you haven't heard about, and then you take that information and foster conversations within your own company. And then if you realize that you need some assistance, to be able to reach out for that assistance. And hopefully, if you learn something today and you find this worthwhile, when the link is posted, feel free to share that link out to others, and hopefully come back to learn more when we do the next presentation. The agenda, we'll talk a little bit about cybersecurity definitions. I'm not going to spend a big amount of time on that. I'm also not going to cover, I think it was advertised that I'll talk about attacks, but you'll find out why I'm not going to talk about attacks later, because I think you can go to a million places and hear about that for one thing. We're going to talk about risk, we're going to give some statistics, and then we're going to wrap up talking about CMMC, specifically CMMC 2.0. Let's start with the definition of why are we concerned about this? Cybersecurity is really a kind of a sexy wrapper around several different concepts. Network security, which is how we secure the network. Information security, which is what is it on the network that we're trying to protect. And then information assurance, which is the why do we care? Why are we protecting it? Are we protecting it because we don't want to lose customers? We have important data we don't want stolen? Or are we under some obligation like HIPAA to protect healthcare from a compliance or a government requirement for compliance? So when we talk about the CIA triad, which everybody in information security or cybersecurity should know by heart, we're talking about that we want to keep data confidential. Only the authorized persons have access to the data. And that's at all stages of its life cycle. That means when it's at rest, when it's in use, when it's even being transported. And if you come to the next presentation, we'll talk more in depth about what all that means. We want to keep the integrity of our data, make sure it's reliable and accurate. You're not using old data. You're not using data that maybe has been deleted and replaced, for example, and that your data is available when it's needed and where it's needed. And in this new day and age, we need to add on the fact that privacy is becoming a bigger and bigger concern. Okay, you've got all this data, you're protecting it, but also what are you doing with it? Who are you sharing that data with, and how are you sharing that data that in the past, maybe those people you shared it with, you thought you could trust. So that's becoming a big concern as well when we talk about cybersecurity or information security. In the old days, and I say the old days, just even to 2017, I would walk into a company to talk to them about their cybersecurity and what I could do for them back then. And they were doing well if they had antivirus. They were doing even better if they had strong passwords. And, if they were doing backup, I was giving them kudos. But really then if they were teaching their employees about phishing emails, not clicking on links, they were really kind of ahead of the game. And then really they get a good high score if they had a firewall between their company and the internet. And you may laugh at that, that's 2015, 2016, 2017. Sadly, I'm walking into companies in 2022, and a lot of them have this as their minimum, or their maximum rather. I'm still finding this is all a company may have, and they may not even have all of these things in place. And we're talking again about 2022. So not a lot, unfortunately, in some companies have changed in their cybersecurity strategy. So what I used to tell my clients, the reason this is important is that it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when a cyber attack is going to happen at your company. Now I have a whole different strategy when I talk to companies, because one of the first questions I ask them is, tell me about your cyber events. And it's pretty much 100% of the companies that I'm talking to are telling me 1, 2, or 3 cyber events. So it's no longer when, it's now, okay, tell me about the events you've already had. And so now my new strategy, in the end, it's not going to matter if you have a few scars, but it will matter if you didn't live. And what do I mean by that? When if I were to go through all the different ways that a company could be cyber attacked, the bottom line is 60% of all small companies that have been cyber attacked, and specifically ransomware, but it could be as much as some sort of virus that destroys their data and it can't be recovered. But 60% of small companies close within 6 months of being attacked. That was a statistic in 2015. It was a statistic in 17, 19, as you see there. And I just was in a presentation last week in 2022, and it's still roughly around 60%. So now we are in a strategy that life is not a matter of holding good cards, but of playing a poor hand well. And what do I mean by a poor hand well? We are all dealing with cybersecurity. It's now becoming a matter of life. And it really boils down to how well you can play that poor hand and keep your business up and running, because there's a lot of stuff going on out there. As we talk about in cybersecurity, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people working day and night to try to get into your network. They only have to be right once, and they have all the time and all the resources in the world to try to get that one-time event into your company. You have to be right 100% of the time in order to protect yourself from that attack, because that one time you're attacked and they're successful, you're going to lose. So when we talk about what kind of industries are at risk, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, defines 16 critical infrastructures in the United States. And as I mentioned earlier, I really am focused on manufacturing. So when we talk about manufacturing as a critical infrastructure, it contributes $2.8 trillion annually to the U.S. economy. And that was first quarter of this year. I know we hear about supply chain and slowdowns and, all that kind of stuff. But this was how strong manufacturing was even through the first quarter of this year. And the bottom line is, I think most of us have heard that 70% of us are employed by small companies. Most of us don't work for large firms. And that's just so true in manufacturing. The majority of manufacturing firms in the US are quite small. A lot of them are family owned, were started by a father or a grandfather. Some have been around for 100 years. And so we've got all of these people out there that are really just trying to, survive, make a profit. They've got other risks and concerns, but specifically in Georgia, the manufacturers account for roughly 10% of the total output of the state. Because I'm in Georgia, I don't know if anybody is from another state other than Georgia, but I'm focused primarily here in Georgia. And it employs almost 10% of the workforce in the state, an average of close to 400,000 people. And when it comes to the defense industrial base, Georgia is number 10 in defense spending, $15.8 billion in the state. And you can see from that chart, and all of this is public information, that Lockheed Martin gets $3.3 billion. But here at Georgia Tech, where I work, we're not too shabby with $500 million there in defense industrial base spending. And so you can see the kind of trickle down there, but when you add that up, that doesn't add up to 15 billion. That adds up to what? 4.5, 5 billion. So there's another $10 billion of defense contracts spread around the state, and you can kind of see how that breaks down. When you talk about manufacturers, we have about 6,600 manufacturers in the state of Georgia. Roughly 1,200 of those support the defense industrial base, with an average contract award around $10,000. So again, you're talking small contracts, but some of them obviously are much larger to add up to that B with a billion figure. Why is that? Well, we just announced that for the 9th year in a row, Georgia is the #1 place to do business. And I know we're all proud of that. And we keep attracting these businesses, and specifically attracting businesses in manufacturing. But manufacturing has another risk, and I'm sure a lot of you are seeing it, whatever industry segment you're in, seeing a lot of these same things. The Great Resignation and the Great Tsunami. The Great Tsunami is roughly the baby boomers, etc. 10,000 people a day are retiring. And so we're losing that skill, that knowledge, and ability from these workers. So these are people that are walking out with great amounts of history with companies. And then, of course, we've got the Great Resignation, which came about, the theorists say, because of COVID and the shutdown, and people, looking in the mirror and evaluating their lives and saying, wow, I want to do something else. I want to become a Sherpa in Nepal and sit on a mountaintop and, gaze my navel or something. I know I'm being facetious, but, people are really evaluating their lives and saying, I want to do something else. So people are leaving in droves, and nowhere do we see that more as in manufacturing. So now we've got a problem in manufacturing, that we've got all this work, right? Because when we look at hiring, job openings in manufacturing, these are unfilled job openings, have gone as high this year as 1 million job openings in manufacturing alone. And we just keep adding more jobs, right? #1 place to do business. So now Georgia added over 15,000 manufacturing jobs last year. We're on track to keep adding more jobs this year in manufacturing. So the other side of that is, even though we're whatever the heck we're in, right, or recession or inflation or whatever, our unemployment rates, not just in Georgia, but nationwide, are at record lows. I heard a report last week that we've got 2 jobs for every person out there right now. And so I guess some of us, would like to work 2 jobs. So there's an opportunity for that. But most of us are pretty fulfilled and pretty busy with the 1 job that we have. So when we look at that, how specifically in manufacturing, and we see this in other industries as well, how are manufacturers filling that gap for the lack of employees? Well, there's something else that's been going on for the last few years, which is kind of helping, and that is the basically modernizing the use of new technology in what's called Industry 4.0, creating what are called cyber physical systems using the Internet of Things and connecting into networks. So now, in the old days, like the last 20 years, it was cool to put the word E in front of everything. It was e-commerce or e-learning or e-whatever. Now with manufacturing 4.0 or industry 4.0, it's putting the word smart in front of everything. Smart traffic control, smart cities, smart manufacturing. And what that means is that people are using all of this new technology to try to do what they would have done with a person with some sort of technology, using the Internet of Things. All those little devices that connect, like your toaster and your refrigerator and your Fitbit, and it all to the internet. They're making use of cloud computing, hybrid multi-cloud IT architecture, integrating IT and OT, et cetera, And from all of this is coming a lot of data. And so, one, that data now has to be protected. But the other thing that we see is that manufacturing is either the first or the second most attacked industry as far as ransomware is concerned. And so using all of these new products, this whole IoT, making smart manufacturers, smart whatever industry, it's just allowing more devices to be connected to the network. And these devices are extending the footprint of where the network is, allowing more. It's basically like saying you're putting more and more windows in your house for someone to break into your house. So a lot more attack vector places. So let's talk specifically. I'm not going to get deep into technology for this particular discussion. If you come back for the next one, I will go more into controls and a little more technology discussion. But there was a couple things that I did want to touch base on, because they really are helping to expand that risk farther and farther out to edges of the network, edges of manufacturing that we have not seen before. One of them is IT and OT convergence. Most of you know what information technology is. You may not know what operational technology is. And that is, even if you're in manufacturing. I'm walking into plants now, I'm talking with their IT people. And when I mention OT, they will ask me, what is that? When I define it, they go, oh yeah, we've got that. And then when I say, who is taking care of it, that's even the scarier answer, right? So let's talk about IT and OT. IT is your traditional, it's your corporate systems. You're used to it saying, that's my laptop, it's my desktop, we have servers, we have email, etc. That's all tied together in a network. And what I'm finding is a lot of networks are flat, which means that there is no segmentation in that network. So when I look at that network, I'm seeing all kinds of other things plugged into that network: telephone systems, camera systems, card reader, badge readers. I'm seeing, people that time clocks, for example. Well, that is things that can ride wireless access points on your IT network. But when we talk about OT, we're talking about industrial control systems. So all kinds of safety instrumented systems, process alarms, etc. These are devices that are connected to the machines out in the plant. The machines that are actually doing the work, stamping out the product, putting the product together, welding the product, etc. And in the past, those machines were, and I always say I'm not trying to insult the machines, but those machines were dumb. They did one thing, they did it well, or they did whatever the person controlling that machine told that machine to do. But a lot of those machines have proprietary type control systems, operating systems on them that collects data that the person running that machine can program that machine to do specific tasks. And so now what we've got is that from the smart city, smart manufacturing, smart whatever perspective, is there's a lot of data out there that can help a company work faster, work harder, work smarter, work on doing planned maintenance earlier. So if a ball bearing were to go out of specification and whatever's rolling down that list is gets off 1 millimeter and you have to scrap or throw away a lot of product, but that one ball bearing is now monitored and you know that out of the 1 million ball bearings on that roller, it's going out of spec, and you can stop the line and replace that ball bearing, that your dashboard is reporting specifically where that ball bearing is, and you can take the line down, replace the part, and get it back up and running and not have wasted goods. That's important. And more companies are moving to that, right? So that's what we're talking about. And so when we talk about ICS, instrument control systems, you may have heard of it as like SCADA or, ICS or PLCs or whatever. And so what is inside of those devices are, as I said, proprietary protocols. You may have a screen where you interface with it. I was just at a plant last week, and there was a graphical interface, a monitor on a welding device, and they were so proud that they pointed over and they showed a gentleman sitting at a desk, and he had a computer sitting there, and they said he can control from that device this machine and put in and program all the things this robotic welder or robotic cutting machine, laser cutting machine can do. And my question was, how is he doing that? And I said, it's connected to your network, right? Where's the cable? And everybody's looking at me like, what cable, right? So these devices are out in your plants, and people are not understanding that these devices are perfect attack points, because the enemy knows that you're adding all of these devices into your network. And not only adding them into your network, you're adding them into more and more systems at your company, putting it into your ERP system. So now you've got all these devices sitting out in the plant, which are great attack points that lead you right into your financial management or your supply chain management or customer relation database. So anyway, again, not to get deep in the woods here, but just to talk about those couple of things, and then something that's near and dear probably to a lot of people that work for you, and that's their new ability to work from home. Walking into manufacturers, seeing people still out on the floor, standing in front of the machines, but then going into the offices and seeing empty offices and saying, where are your employees? And they're at home working. So, what kind of risks does that introduce into your system? Because those are people who you don't know what is on their network. In fact, when I ask questions about, do you know what information is on the computers that they're taking home and what they're putting on them at home and how they're storing it and how you're backing it up, and have you ever looked at it to make sure that Johnny's homework is not a part of that, or Johnny's using, mom's laptop or dad's laptop to do homework and go to certain sites. And the answers are, we don't know that, right? So those are the kind of risks amongst a bunch of others that are out there affecting people. I've heard from, a lot of companies, well, we have cyber insurance. Well, one is, the coverage cost for cyber insurance. If you have it, you will know, and when I mention this, most of the people in the room start shaking their head, that coverage costs have gone up. I've heard as much as 8-fold in the last couple of years, because these insurance companies realize that what they thought was a good thing, once they're getting hit with some of these claims, it wasn't such a good idea, and the coverage is going down. And when I talk about the third one, it's I have a condo at Hilton Head, and Hurricane Matthew came through, and we all had insurance, but because Matthew was a named storm, our insurance won't cover it. So that's where FEMA came in and made us all whole, because we had overall, for all the condos, FEMA insurance. So this is very much the same thing now, where these cyber insurers are saying, if there is a named cyber attack, Petya or whatever, that's out there, and you did not take steps to protect yourself when it came out that you needed to put this patch in place, and you didn't do it, your cyber insurance is not going to pay. And the other thing that I find is that a lot of people don't know, because again, one of the first questions I will ask you is, provide me with a list of all your assets, software, hardware, etc., and not just what it costs to physically buy those, but what would it cost to physically replace those with third-party vendors, programs that got lost, etc., and getting them stood up. And most companies don't have a good handle on that. So again, from an insurance perspective, if you were to lose everything and had to replace it tomorrow, most people, because they buy this, their IT equipment over time, will be shell-shocked. I went out, I thought I wanted a new Surface laptop the first of the year, and I found out it was more than twice the price of what I paid for my original Surface 5 years ago, and I thought twice about it. But I didn't have to do that. If you have to do it, you may be paying 2 and 3 times because of supply chain, demand, etc., to replace your network. And that's happening in companies all over the US. So another risk of manufacturing is, it goes back to, why the heck do I care that manufacturing was the number 1 or number 2 industry being targeted? Part of it is because we have been, manufacturers are third parties to our defense industrial base. They are creating the pieces, parts that, individually don't mean anything, but when it all goes together, you've got a battleship, or you've got a tank, or you've got an aircraft that's very sophisticated, or a missile system. And so why go spend billions of dollars to develop a sophisticated, highly technical, proprietary system when you can simply just go steal it a piece at a time? What was that? The old Johnny Cash, he built the Cadillac one piece at a time. He stole it. He just walked out of the plant, the car plant, one piece at a time, and then bolted it all together and had his free Cadillac. Well, that's what these third world country, state-sponsored cyber attackers are doing, going out and stealing one piece at a time, and then being able to reconstruct that into, as you see here, a J-31 Chinese fighter jet that looks extremely like our F-35, including some of its weapon systems, communication systems, etc. So the DoD realized this was happening years ago and started talking to manufacturers and saying, something's got to give here. You guys need to step up the plate, because even look right here, there are more than 800 companies employing 100,000 people in the state of Georgia, just in the aerospace manufacturing space alone. So we can look at, aerospace, we can look at cars, we can look at weapons. And one of the things that I want you to see is where those dots are located. So you can see purple dots on the right for car manufacturers all over the state. If we go back here, you can see bubbles showing where the manufacturers are located and how many people that they're employing. And, the point being is that they're all over the state, which is great, right? From a socioeconomic standpoint, we want to spread that wealth. We want to give opportunity to people all over the state of Georgia to be able to better themselves and work at these jobs and get these jobs, right? But the other part of that is when I look at these dots, I look at the lack of technical resources to help these companies to achieve cybersecurity and achieve some of these things that the DoD is requiring in CMMC 2.0. And part of that is just the fact that we're down almost 750,000 in cybersecurity talent alone. These are for initial coming straight out of school sort of jobs, entry-level jobs. This is not just people who have a lot of experience. This is just the demand for anybody that is a cybersecurity professional. And you can see that by the color of the state that Georgia is there amongst the top number of jobs. Last year, I heard it was around 25,000. It's probably a lot higher than that now, specifically with CMMC coming down, the demand for cybersecurity talent. And what that means is that when I look at these companies, a lot of them use what we call service providers, local IT, managed service providers, local IT companies. And when I sit down with these local IT companies, they are there to keep the IT up and running for these companies, to replace a server, replace a laptop, run cable, set up a wireless network connection between two entities or two firewalls that VPN in, or a VPN so employees can communicate. But when it comes to what are the controls that need to be in place to protect all of that, to monitor all of that, to gather data from all of that, to look at all that data and see what's going on those networks, they're at a loss. And that's not their fault, right? That's not what they provide as far as services. So another part of this is, well, why don't manufacturers just go out and hire a cybersecurity person? Well, partly this is how much, on average, what a manufacturing job pays, and this is for the state of Georgia. So roughly, let's say $11 an hour. If you were trying to get an average cybersecurity person, you're going to be paying 4 times that amount. You may be paying the managers at the plant, or who knows, maybe even the president of the plant, or whatever is making at that plant. So a lot of companies just simply can't afford a cybersecurity professional full time in order to pay them the amount to get them on board and bring them into the towns and communities where all of these manufacturers live. So as I said, I've talked about a lot of problems, and the DoD realized this years ago. They came forward as far back as 2015, and they said, you industry, not just manufacturing, you industry have got to protect the information we give you better, because you're bleeding us of intellectual property, of proprietary information on key critical defense systems. So in 2015, they came out with DFARS. And I've talked to some of y'all out there, and you tell me, yes, we saw those DFAR clauses in our contracts. And, we really didn't know what that meant. It was asking us to self-certify to cybersecurity. And, we really wanted the contracts. And so we signed those contracts and we got that work. And the DoD realized that this whole self-compliance, honor system, self-certification, yes, we're meeting this, was just not working. So what this has to do is that there was a lot of different types of information that was being provided to these different industries. And so it's all been combined now into what's called controlled unclassified information. Information that requires safeguarding or dissemination controls with, according to the CMMC guidelines. If you were back with CMMC Model 1.0, there were 5 different segments that you could fall into. Last year, that was narrowed down to 3. Level 1, still self-assessment, 17 practices that you have to attest to through a written document to the DoD from your CEO or whatever. But if you handle CUI, then you're going to have to meet 110 controls per NIST 800-171 and submit to a third-party assessment. Okay, so that's really kind of the bottom line that's coming down from the new CMMC 2.0 guidelines. Just again, quick definitions. You may have heard of 48 CFR. That's the Federal Acquisition Regulation that spells out 15 basic cybersecurity controls that form the basis for CMMC Level 1. And then DFARS Clause 7012 is the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement. That is what is now requiring contractors that do business with the DoD to comply with NIST 800-171. Those DFARS clauses will still be in your contract, okay? And so DFAR Clause 7021 establishes the timetable for DoD contractors to comply with CMMC. And then you may have heard what was called the CMMC accreditation body. That was the organization that was formed to basically qualify, train these assessors for Level 2, which I'm assuming most of you will fall into. Level 3 are kind of your primes. There's a few handful of those, a few dozen of those, but when we look at roughly the 400,000 DoD suppliers right now, the majority of those, hundreds of thousands of those, will fall into CMMC Level 2. And so you're the company, or they're the company where the CMMC AB assessors will walk in and validate and testify to the fact that you meet those 110 controls. That has recently been renamed to the Cyber AB, the Cyber Accreditation Body. They're doing all the same things, they just changed their name. And then we also talked about CUI and how it replaced several categories of information so that make it standard throughout the industry. So let's talk about what you have to do. Well, in order to do business today with the DoD, you have to have something called a Supplier Performance Risk System Score. That must be on file today in order to bid or receive DoD contracts. And what that is it's a numerical representation of how well you meet NIST 800-171. 800-53 that's listed there, those are the controls, specifically talking about the controls that make up the compliance for 171. Your score can range from a negative 203 to a positive 110. So you don't start at 110 and subtract. You start basically at negative 203 and you add based on your compliance answers. And there's approximately 320 questions that if I were to walk in and do a risk or gap assessment, or someone else to your site, they would roughly ask you 320 questions. I will ask you general questions, and from that, do you do backups? No, we don't do backups. And I can answer no to a half a dozen or a dozen questions. So I may not ask you all 320 questions once I get a sense of your network. But the bottom line is you answer yes or no. And if you answer yes, your score goes up. If you answer no, your score stays at whatever that negative number is. Part of that score also, you have to put into this new SPRS database. It has to be listed in the database for you to be able to bid. We're also finding that some third parties, their suppliers or people they work with or suppliers that they supply to that aren't DoD are asking the companies, do you have a SPR score? So this is kind of expanding out even from the DoD as more companies are hearing about it, just wanting to know, hey, how compliant are you? How safe is my information going to be if I do work with you or want to do work with you? So you have to have the SPR score in the system, but you also have to have what's called a system security plan. And that is a detailed response to each of those 110 controls. If you say no to a control or you say yes to a control, if you say yes, then you need to say in your security plan how you're meeting that control. If you say no, then you need to put in there how you're working towards getting to yes on that control. And then the next thing is the plan of action items and milestones. That has to be not just a part of your strategy, but that also has to now be submitted with your SPR score. And what that's saying is, how long is it going to take me to accomplish those 110 controls? And that's called the POEM, or Plan of Action Items and Milestones. So what's the status? On average, it takes about 6 to 12 months to become compliant with the 110 controls. What we're seeing is people are, companies, when we talk to them, we're procrastinating. The government's got to get its act together. They're going to make changes. See, they've already gone from CMMC level 1 to 2. There'll probably be a 3. Why do I need to do this? And so what we hear from people is when the DoD figures out what the heck they want me to do, I'll do it. Until then, I'm waiting. Well, now you've had a decade to improve your cybersecurity posture while these nation states have continued to steal our critical defense information. So the question that the DoD is going to be looking at all these companies and saying, what were you waiting for? Whether it was 800-171, whether it was 53, whether it was DFARS, whether it was just the NIST cybersecurity framework, why didn't you start years ago working on this? Because bottom line, you can kiss your future DoD contracts goodbye because it's coming, right? And so I've talked to clients that they're the sole provider in a mil spec. They are written into a mil spec, right? If they can't get CMMC compliant, then some other company is going to step up to the plate and get written into that mil spec. And otherwise, you're going to have to be playing behind and catch up, and you're going to spend a lot of money to other third-party companies who are only too glad to come in, take your money, and get you compliant in as short a time as they can possibly do that. So again, what's the status? It's been in development for several years, but yet when we do surveys of companies, we find out that the contractors are finding it difficult to achieve and maintain compliance. And again, that's understandable as well from the standpoint of where are these companies located, what resources do they have available? Not, right? Nobody in their IT structure, internal or in their managed service provider, can understand or implement these things. And so 7 out of 10, about 60% of respondents are still finding it very difficult to become CMMC compliant. So this is what's happened in just the last few months. In March of this year, in order to bid, you have to have a SPR score registered. And that doesn't mean that SPR score has to be 110. it just means it can be negative 203. You had to do a self-assessment or have somebody do a gap assessment, but that score had to be on file. In May of this year, DITSCAP pulled 300 companies that reported 110 score and audited those companies. Only 25% passed with a 110 score. In August of this year, voluntary audits begun. They started, the Cyber AB started going out and doing voluntary audits for companies who said, yes, please come. We think we're at 110. So, you know, that quote back there, we're going to wait until the DoD gets its act together, and then we're going to think about it or move on it. The DoD is moving. The projected final ruling is March of next year. I was just on with the Cyber AB chair about a week, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, time flies. And, you know, he was saying it's coming. The final ruling is coming. They don't see that there's going to be CMMC 3.0 or 3.5 or 2.1. And then once the ruling closes and locks down, it's possible that as early as July of next year, compliance becomes mandatory. So what does that mean? That means that you'll calculate, you'll do your gap assessment, you'll come up with your SPUR score, whatever that is, negative all the way up to 110, you'll enter that in. But if you're less than 110, you will also put in that poem that says within 6 months how you will achieve a 110 score. So the timeline, the DoD is not going to let you hang out there for, you know, for months and years to get to that 110 score. And the DoD will start looking at those companies who obviously have higher scores as lower risks to do business with. So it could be less than a year that companies are going to start losing the opportunity to bid to the DoD. The other part, and I forgot to put this on the slide, is that the Department of Justice has also issued a ruling for false statements, specifically to CMMC. And there's already been 3 companies that have already been fined for making false statements that they were in compliance with DoD regulations for doing business with them. And then it came down, and the way it came down is from whistleblowers, because in this Department of Justice ruling, there is money for whistleblowers who will come forward and say, you know, those contracts my company signed for the DoD and those scores, that's not true. So there's an incentive for people to come forward. And like I said, already 3 cases have been prosecuted. So it's getting really hairy and really dicey out there, but, you know, needed, right? We want to protect our critical infrastructure, our national security, etc. So while 7 in 10 respondents reported, you know, being compliant, this is saying that really only 13% of them have a SPUR score of 70 or higher. Remember I said it doesn't have to be 110 to begin with. Most companies that I've walked in, I said, give me your SPUR score. And they said, well, we're positive, but we're not at 110. I walk out telling them they're a negative, and it's a low, you know, very low negative number. So this just confirms that only 13% really, even on a self-assessment, think that they're 70 or higher. When we look at federal prime contractors and subcontractors, this is a recent survey. This is like up-to-date information. This just shows that as far as, you know, the DFARS contract obligations, only 60% of companies out there have an SSP, 53 a plan of action, 46 a SPUR score, et cetera, et cetera. You know, do an annual incident response exercise, do a DFARS assessment, or an annual software compliance, and the numbers just get smaller and smaller. But when we talk about those 110 controls, those things that have to be in place, and you answer yes to all of those, it gets really abysmal. So when we look at solution and control deployment, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where I walk into companies, and it is a very sad exit when I start talking about the lack of controls in these companies. And you can see here the statistics. And these directly map into what we talked about, those, just even for CMMC level 1, some of these areas that you have to be compliant to and self-certifying. But these are definitely major categories that have to be in place for CMMC level 2. So, coming up next, I know we're running short on time, and if anybody had some questions or whatever, you could drop them in the chat. But a couple things. One, next time we will go into these controls, and I will talk philosophically what these mean so that you can understand. Again, trying not to get technical, oh, you need this device, but to talk about the philosophy of each of these, because I think when I do that with companies, it helps them to have a better understanding of when I say you need a physical security program, and they look at me and go, didn't you just drive by the guard that stopped you when you drove onto site? And I go, yes, but there's a lot more to physical security when it comes CMMC. So, it kind of is an eye-opener. So that's, if you can, come back for Cyber 201, an overview. And then Cyber 301, I'll talk about some of the do-it-yourself platforms that are out there, as well as some of the vendors that are out there working on CMMC remediation. So I don't know when we have that planned, but it will hopefully be shortly, so we can follow up on this and get this information out to you. So do you need help with CMMC compliance? I'm working with companies on just getting basic cyber hygiene. Remember that slide that, it started with, antivirus and ended with a firewall? Walking into companies literally with that and helping them become compliant with the NIST cybersecurity framework. Talking to you about cyber resiliency. What happens if you get hit tomorrow? Can you open up your doors the next week? Or compliance with some other risk or cyber-based standard. ISO 27001, I was working on that with a company all last week and told them, I said, you might as well step up to 27701, which is privacy. Your companies are starting to ask you if you're ISO compliant, international companies, but also how are you handling the privacy issue? This all begins, all the documents will tell you, you've got to begin with a cyber risk gap assessment. You need to know, how can I put it otherwise, how bad off you are in order to know how far you have to come so that you can put together, a plan and the resources, etc. But there are advantages to this. You can assure your customers and the public that you're serious about cyber. And as I said, other companies are asking companies they do business with, are you cyber secure? And it's helping them to get new clients to be able to certify to these standards. And then some companies I'm looking at that only want to go like ISO 27001 or NIST CSF, and saying, what you do here, in the event that another company loses the contract, you could, if you go ahead and do CMMC compliance, a few more steps, because you're 99 or 95% of the way there on one of these other standards, and then you too could bid for those lucrative DoD contracts that other companies are going to lose. So that's there's some of the advantages. Who are we? I told you I work for the Manufacturing Extension Program at Georgia Tech. We are state and federally funded, and we are designed to help manufacturers. So we actually have state and federal funds that help offset what you would normally pay. And we are part of Georgia Economic Development. So we are out there wanting to see companies succeed, to improve manufacturing performance and enhance the economic well-being. So we are a resource for you. We have 10 regions across the state. We have 30 plus project managers within 2 hours really of any Georgia manufacturer. And you can scan that code to find your regional manager. And again, we're part of EI Squared. And that has, all kinds of other segments, food, aerospace, healthcare, etc. So if you're not, if you're listening to this and you're not manufacturing, we're still there and probably available to help you in your industry segment. There's a lot of other things we work on: strategy, leadership development, quality, sustainability, obviously cybersecurity, supply chain, food quality. These are some of those other areas at EI Squared that we do, as well as in MEP. And so I won't go through this, but just, we've worked with a lot of companies over the years and helped them retain sales and employees. So there are other CMMC resources out there. As I mentioned, I'm part of the TAG, Georgia Defense Industrial Base Task Force, but other task force members is Heather Maxfield. She is running this. She's actually sponsoring this today along with TAG Ed. So we thank them for that. But TAG, Defense Industrial Base Task Force, there's her contact information. Mark Lupo at the University of Georgia. He works with governments, municipalities, other small businesses that are not necessarily in the manufacturing space. So, give him a shout out. Obviously, there's my contact information. If I can help you in any way, I'm available to, just for a quick call to, if I can't help you, maybe direct you into someone else. And so here is, some contact information that you can scan if you're interested. We just put out at Georgia MEP a new YouTube video, which is pretty cool. And it really talks about what we do and how we work with manufacturers. And again, there's my LinkedIn information if you want to follow up and see if I maybe know a little bit about what I'm talking about. But otherwise, I think it is 12:59. I actually finished 1 minute early. And so does anybody have anything that they want to drop in the chat? Also, let me just share real quickly with you, if I can, a resource. And let me just move this out of the way. I have developed a cyber assessment tool. It's just a down and dirty tool that's, about 3 pages long. And what that does is allow you to go through and answer yes or no, or you don't know about certain areas: cybersecurity management, cybersecurity expertise, your cybersecurity technologies that you can use. I tried to drop that in the chat. I guess I'm technology challenged. But if you want to reach out to me, I am glad to send this to you so you can use it. Or send it to somebody in your organization that could, potentially just do a quick down and dirty self-assessment. I would appreciate it if you do use it. I'd love to get it back. Obviously, I'm at Georgia Tech. Research is huge for us, and that research helps us develop new products and services that we can offer, and it lets me know, kind of the benchmark of companies in cybersecurity. It's anonymous. I don't care really to know who you are per se. If you want to let me know who you are, you can contact me directly about that. But this resource is available. And like I said, I will try to make these slides and this document available to you afterwards as links. So with that, I don't see anything in the chat, and I believe we are done for the day. So I will thank you for attending, and I'm going to put back up right here at the end. Hopefully, I thought I had it. Let me put back up my contact information. There you go. I think that's back up. So again, thanks for attending. And if you have any questions or whatever, contact Heather or myself or Mark. With that, have a good day.